Most 911 dispatchers will tell you the hardest calls are the ones that don't have answers. The ones where the line goes dead, the screams cut off, and all you're left with is a feeling that something went very, very wrong. We don't always find out what happens after, but sometimes you don't need to. Sometimes you already know. This is the call that made me quit. It came in at 4:06 a.m., late enough that most of the night's chaos had died down. The line was quiet. The kind of quiet that starts to weigh on you. The moments in between calls where your mind drifts, thoughts creeping in about what you heard last night, about the people whose names you'll never know, about the ones you couldn't save. Then, my screen lit up. Unknown ID, no location data. Not uncommon, but not exactly normal either. Even blocked numbers usually give us something. A rough tower ping, a disconnected return signal. This question mark. This was just blank. I sat up, straightened my headset, and answered. 911, what's your emergency? Nothing. Dead air. I checked my headset. The call was connected. Someone was there. I tried again. Can you hear me? Do you need help? Then, a breath. Software shaky, like someone trying to stay silent. I felt the first prick of unease crawl up my spine. My volume was already maxed. There was no background noise, no TV, no wind, no distant voices, just breathing. Ma'am? I tried again, keeping my tone even. I need you to tell me if you need help. Finally, a whisper. Please, help me. A woman. Her voice barely above a breath. I sat up straight, eyes locked on my screen. Ma'am, what's happening? Are you in danger? A sharp inhale. Then, the sound of something shifting. Not static, not bad reception. Something moving, like fabric against the floor, like someone was crawling. A cold knot formed in my gut. He's in the room. Her voice was so quiet it barely existed. I flicked my eyes to my supervisor, waved him over, and pulled up the tracking system. No data, no tower ping, nothing. That wasn't possible. Even disconnected phones will send a location before the call drops. I swallowed, forcing myself to push through it. Ma'am, can you tell me where you are? Are you at home? She didn't answer. I strained to hear, listening hard. And then, a sound that made my skin crawl. A slow creak, like a door easing open. I muted my mic and swore under my breath. Ma'am, I said, lowering my voice, steady. I need you to move as quietly as possible. Is there a window, a way out? A pause, then a sound I didn't expect. A voice, male. Where are you going? Cold ice poured through me, the way he said it, soft, deliberate, like he was teasing her. Then, footsteps. Not fast, slow, measured. My stomach coiled. She muffled a sob. I forced my voice steady. Ma'am, stay on the line with me. Do not hang up. The footsteps stopped. Then, the floor creaked again. Not a footstep, weight shifting, like someone was kneeling down. Then I heard breathing, but not hers. Lower, right against the phone. I didn't speak, didn't move. Then, that voice again. Who is that? A deep, paralyzing dread settled in my chest. He was talking about me. The call was still muted on my end. There was no way he could hear me. But he knew. I unmuted. Ma'am, is there another phone in the house? No answer. Then, a shuffle. The sound of the phone being snatched away. I gripped my desk. Sir, this is emergency services. Put the phone down. A beat of dead silence. Then, the line went open. No voice, no sounds. Just open air. I listened. Every second stretched forever. Then, a new sound. At first it was too faint to recognize. But then it got louder. A wet, dragging noise, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. I felt my fingers dig into the desk. I pressed dispatch so hard my knuckles cracked. Get a trace on this call now. My supervisor shook his head. We're trying. There's nothing there. I stared at the screen. No signal, no number, no call record. But I was still on the line, listening. The sound continued, slow, rhythmic. A thud, then another, like a body being hauled over carpet. I opened my mouth to say something. Anything. When suddenly it stopped. A beat of silence. Then through the open connection, one final sound. A door closing, software deliberate. Then silence. The line cut out. And that was it. No trace, no callback, nothing. I sat there, headset still in my hands. The room felt smaller. I filed a report, checked with local PD. No incidents that night. But here's what gets me. The way he spoke, the way he waited, like he wanted me to hear, like he wanted me to listen. And I did. God help me, I did. And I will never forget the sound of that door closing. I've worked 911 dispatch for almost 7 years. I've heard just about everything: screams, gunshots, last words, people begging for their lives. You learn how to handle it, how to stay calm, how to compartmentalize. But there was one call where I couldn't, and I still think about it. It came in at 3:42 a.m., a late night dead zone, where the calls slow down and the room gets eerily quiet. It's the time of night where everything feels heavier, like something unseen is sitting in the room with you, waiting for the next call to break the silence. I remember this because at that moment, I was lazily stirring a half-cold cup of coffee, half listening to a drunk guy on another line ranting about how the government was tracking his thoughts. Then my line lit up. Unknown number, no location data. I frowned. Even with burners or blocked IDs, we usually get something. A tower ping, an approximate area, anything. But this was just empty. I picked up. 911, what's your emergency? Silence. Not static, not muffled voices, just a long, deep nothing. I leaned forward, listening hard. There was something there, a faint sound, breathing, shallow, slow, like someone deliberately holding back their fear. I waited a beat, then repeated. Can you hear me? What's your emergency? More breathing. This time it stuttered, like the caller had tried to muffle a sob. I felt my pulse pick up. This wasn't a prank. Someone was listening. Someone was terrified. I softened my tone. I'm here to help. Are you safe? A tiny, shaky inhale. Then, finally, a voice. He doesn't know I have the phone. The words were barely audible, the voice quivering. A woman. I sat up straighter, my fingers already flying across the keyboard. Okay, I said carefully. Is someone in the house with you? A pause, then. Yes. I pulled up the tracking system. Still no location. I felt my gut tighten. Where are you right now? The breathing hitched. Then, an awful realization crept in. The breathing wasn't coming from just one person. There was another sound, fainter, heavier, right next to hers, breathing in sync with hers. My chest tightened. Ma'am, I said, keeping my voice steady. Is he awake? A pause, then barely above a whisper. I don't know. Her fear was palpable. I turned to my supervisor, signaling urgency. I kept my voice low. Are you able to move? Another pause. Then in the faintest whisper, he stopped breathing. A sharp chill ran down my spine. I hovered over the emergency dispatch key. What do you mean? Her voice was so quiet I could barely hear it. He was breathing, right next to me. But now he stopped. I felt something prickle at the back of my neck. I didn't know what to say. Did he wake up? Was he listening? Was he watching her? Or worse, was he pretending to be asleep? Then, a new sound. At first, it was almost imperceptible. Then, it grew clearer. A shift of fabric, a tiny, minuscule creak, like the weight on a mattress had just moved. The woman's breathing picked up, fast, panicked, but silent. I felt it in my chest, the raw, paralyzing terror. I could picture it. She wasn't alone. She could feel him there, lying still, waiting, listening. I tapped my supervisor's screen, whispering, "We need to trace this now." He nodded, already working. I forced my voice to stay steady. "Ma'am, I need you to..." Then I heard it. The first sound from him, a slow, steady exhale, directly into the phone. I froze. So did she. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't hang up. She just stopped breathing altogether. Like she knew. Like she'd just made a fatal mistake. The silence was suffocating. Then, a quiet shift. A hand closing over a mouth. I pressed the dispatch button so hard my finger hurt. "Ma'am, I need you to..." Click. The line cut. I ripped off my headset. My supervisor shot me a look. What happened? I was still gripping the desk. "I don't know." We tried to redial. Nothing. Dead number. The line had never existed. We ran a full trace and combed local reports. There were no incidents that night, no record of a woman calling for help, no break-ins, no bodies, nothing. But I still remember the way she breathed. I still hear the moment she realized he had stopped, because that was when she knew. That was the moment she understood he had been awake the entire time, and he had been waiting. I think about her a lot. I don't know if she made it out. I don't know if I was the last voice she ever spoke to, but I do know one thing. I will never forget the sound of that man exhaling into the phone, because he knew I was there. And for some reason, he wanted me to hear it. If you work 911 dispatch long enough, you learn to recognize the sound of real fear. I don't mean the panic of a car accident or a home invasion, that's obvious. I mean bone-deep terror. The kind where a person has already accepted that they aren't making it out alive. The kind that makes people whisper because they think if they're too loud, something might happen. I've only heard it a handful of times in my career, and one of those times ruined my life. It started on a Tuesday night, slow shift. The kind where you spend most of your time listening to officers bullshitting on the radio while you nurse a stale cup of coffee, waiting for something to break the monotony. At 2:13 a.m., a call came in. I remember this because it was the first one in almost an hour. The number flashed on my screen. Blocked ID. Not unusual. Some carriers don't display numbers when people dial 911. Some people call from burner phones, disconnected lines, even Wi-Fi signals that don't always register. I picked up. 911, what's your emergency? Silence. I frowned, checking my headset connection. The call was still live. Someone was there. I tried again. Can you hear me? Do you need help? Breathing. Ragged. Uneven. Like someone had been crying. Then, a whisper. He's here. A woman's voice. Shaky. Fragile. She sounded young. Mid-20s maybe. I sat up straight, my fingers already moving over the keyboard. "Ma'am, is someone in your house?" No response. Just more breathing. Then something else. A soft scraping noise, like fingernails dragging along a wall. I muted my mic and motioned to my supervisor. "Ma'am, I need you to tell me where you are." I kept my voice even, calm, controlled. I started pulling up the tracking system. Nothing. No address. No cell tower ping. Just a blank screen. That shouldn't happen. I felt my stomach twist. "Ma'am, are you hiding?" A pause. Then she let out the softest, most broken whisper I've ever heard. "He's in the walls." A sharp chill ran down my back. "What do you mean?" I pressed. "Who's in the walls?" Silence. Then, so quiet I almost missed it. "He's listening." Click. Call disconnected. I sat there, headset still pressed to my ear. My supervisor frowned. What the hell was that? I tried calling the number back, deadline. I checked the system again. Still no trace of the call, like it had never happened. I wrote up a report anyway. Not that it mattered. Night 2. The next night, at 2:13 a.m., I got another call, same blocked number. I felt my throat tighten as I answered. 911, what's your emergency? Silence. Then, breathing. But this time, it was slower, like the caller was just waiting for me to speak. "Ma'am?" I tried again. Then I heard something that made my blood run cold. A second voice, right next to hers, whispering, "Don't speak." The call cut out. I ripped my headset off. My hands were ice cold. I didn't file a report this time. I told myself it was a prank, some sicko screwing with the system. But something about the way the man spoke. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even a warning. It was a command. Night 3. At 2:13 a.m. the call came again. But this time I heard footsteps. Heavy. Slow. They weren't hers. She was crying. I could barely make out her words through the static. Then a thud. A loud, awful thud, like a body hitting the floor. And then the sound of the phone being picked up. Someone breathed into the receiver. Slow. Deep. Then, in a low whisper, a man's voice said, "Found her." Call disconnected. I lost it. I turned to my supervisor, yelling. Told him we needed to trace the call, that I'd gotten it 3 nights in a row. He just stared at me. Then he said something that made my skin crawl. "What call?" I felt like the air got sucked out of the room. "The one I just took," I said, feeling the cold sweat on my neck. His face stayed blank. "You haven't taken a call in over an hour." I turned back to my screen. No call log, no record. I just stood there, staring at the monitor, my own breathing ragged. Then at 2:14 a.m. my personal phone buzzed. Blocked number. I just stared at it. It rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Then, right before voicemail, it stopped. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I quit my job. 1 month later, I moved. Different city, different job, different number. I started to think maybe it was over. Then at 2:13 a.m., my phone rang. Blocked ID. I didn't answer, but it left a voicemail. I pressed play. At first, just static. Then, the sound of something scraping against the receiver. Then, that same woman's voice. "He's in the walls." Then, that slow, heavy breathing. And then, right before the message cut out, a man's voice. "Found you." I smashed my phone against the wall. I don't know how he found me, but I think, no matter where I go, he always will. Have you ever heard something that you know should be impossible? I'm not talking about weird, creepy noises at night or the wind sounding like a whisper. I mean something that breaks reality. Something that, no matter how much you try to explain it away, you can't. I got a 911 call like that once. It was my 3rd year as a dispatcher working the overnight shift. You know the deal. Drunks, domestic fights, the occasional house fire. You get used to the patterns, the rhythm of emergency calls, but at exactly 2:17 a.m. I got a call I should have never answered. The first call. My screen lit up. No ID, no location, just a connection. I frowned. Even restricted numbers usually give us something. A disconnected line, a general tower ping, a footprint. This one had nothing. I picked up. 911, what's your emergency? Silence, not static, not muffled noise, just absence. Then, a breath. Shaky, uneven, like someone was just realizing they'd made the call. "Hello?" I asked again. A woman's voice came through, barely a whisper. "He's in the house." My stomach dropped. I straightened in my chair, fingers already flying over the keyboard. "Ma'am, are you in danger?" Another breath. Shallow. Panicked. In the background I heard something. A faint, rhythmic thumping, like footsteps on a wooden floor. Slow. Measured. She inhaled sharply. Paused. Then her voice, trembling, quieter. "Yes." I felt my pulse pick up. "Where are you located?" I started pulling up the tracking system. Nothing. No address, no tower ping. Just a dead signal. That doesn't happen. "Ma'am, stay on the line with me. Are you in a room? Can you lock the door?" She gasped. Her breath hitched. Then she whispered, "No. He's outside the door." I muted the line and turned to my supervisor. Urgent, tense. "I can't get a location," I whispered. "We need to..." Click. The line cut out. I stared at my screen. No trace of the call, no log, no record that it ever came in. And then, my second phone line rang. The second call. Same number, same no ID. I felt my pulse slam in my ears as I picked up again. 911, what's your emergency? Silence. Then, the same woman's voice. "He's in the house." Word for word, identical. My breath hitched. My hands hovered over the keyboard, fingers frozen. "Ma'am, can you tell me your address?" She hesitated. And then, in the exact same whisper, the exact same tone, "He's outside the door." I turned to my screen. The timestamps were identical. 2:17 a.m. My body went cold. I stood up so fast my chair slammed against the desk. My supervisor glanced over, confused. "What's wrong?" I could barely speak. "The call is looping." His brow furrowed as he walked over. "What are you talking about?" I pointed at the two identical call logs. Same time, same words, exactly the same. "This isn't possible." Then, my third line rang. The third call, same damn number. I didn't want to pick up. I didn't want to hear it again. But my supervisor reached over and pressed the button. Click. 911, what's your emergency? Silence. Then, a different voice, a deep, rasping whisper. "You shouldn't be listening." Then, the worst sound I've ever heard. It was static, but not just static. There were voices inside of it. Hundreds, maybe thousands, screaming, begging, some whispering, some laughing, some just repeating my words back to me. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. And then, it just stopped. Call disconnected. The line went dead. My supervisor slowly took off his headset. His face was gray. "Shut it down," he muttered. "Right now." I yanked the power on the system, killing the connection. But when I looked at my screen, the call log was gone, like it had never existed. 2:17 a.m. 3 days later, I didn't sleep that night, or the night after. Then, on the third night, my personal phone rang. 2:17 a.m., no ID. I didn't pick up, but it left a voicemail. I listened to it once, just once. At first, just static. Then, the sound of something scraping against the receiver. Then, that same woman's voice. "He's in the house." Then, that slow, heavy breathing. And then, right before the message cut out, a man's voice. "You shouldn't be listening." I smashed my phone against the wall. I quit my job the next day. 1 year later, I moved. New city, new job, new number. For a while, I thought it was over. Then, on the anniversary at 2:17 a.m., my phone rang, blocked ID. I didn't answer, but it left a voicemail. I sat there staring at my phone, feeling cold. I already knew what it would say. And I prayed, more begged, that this time it would be different, that this time it would stop. But I know the truth. It will never stop. And one day I'll pick up. And when I do, I know exactly what I'll hear. You ever have one of those jobs that slowly eats away at you? Little by little, piece by piece, until you don't even recognize yourself anymore? Yeah, that's what being a 911 dispatcher did to me. I lasted 3 years before I finally cracked. Most people assume the hardest part of the job is hearing people scream for help. But that's not it. It's the silence. The calls that go dead mid-sentence. The ones you never find out what happened to. You get used to it after a while, or at least you pretend to. But there was one call that broke me. The first call. It was 2 a.m., the dead zone. Most of the calls at this hour were drunk drivers, domestic disputes, or the occasional overdose. But that night was quiet. Too quiet. It was the kind of silence that gets under your skin. the kind that makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, like the whole world was holding its breath. Then, at exactly 2:17 a.m., a call came in. No caller ID, no location, just a connection. I answered with the usual, 911, what's your emergency? Nothing. Just faint static. Not bad reception static. Not the usual cell signal cutting in and out. It was deeper, almost like a TV on a dead channel. I was about to repeat myself when I heard something. A voice, a woman's voice, barely above a whisper. Can you hear me? I straightened up. Yes, ma'am. What's your emergency? She hesitated. I could hear breathing on the line. Shaky, uneven, like someone trying to hold back tears. I need help. I don't know where I am. Her voice cut in and out, not like bad reception, like the line itself was breaking apart. I pulled up the tracking system trying to pin down her location. Nothing. No address, no coordinates, just a blank screen. That doesn't happen. Even burner phones give us a general tower location. I kept my voice calm. Are you in immediate danger? Her breathing quickened. I think so. A noise in the background, a distant thud. I cranked up my headset volume, trying to make it out. Can you describe your surroundings? She took a shuddering breath. It's dark, cold. There's a door, but it won't open. I felt my stomach twist. Something wasn't right. Her words weren't just afraid. They sounded disoriented, like she wasn't just lost, like she didn't know how she got there. Her voice trembled. Please, I don't think I'm alone. I grabbed my supervisor's attention, waving frantically for them to listen in. Still no location. Just a dead, empty line. Ma'am, is there anything near you? A window, a street sign? Can you hear any traffic? A pause. Then, in a dead monotone, I don't know where I am. My pulse slammed in my ears. Her entire tone had changed, like someone had flipped a switch. Then, a sharp click, like the receiver had been picked up on an old landline. Then, the same voice layered over itself, speaking out of sync. Can you hear me? I don't know where I am. Please, I don't think I'm alone. Exactly the same words. The exact same intonation. It wasn't repeating. It was replaying. The second call. My hands went clammy. Ma'am, are you in danger? Who's with you? Another click. The static spiked, then fell away. And then, I swear to God, I heard breathing. But not hers. Slow. Deep. Right against the receiver. A man's voice, barely above a whisper. Don't send anyone. Click. The line went dead. I ripped off my headset, my heart slamming in my chest. My supervisor looked at me, pale as a ghost. What the hell was that? He muttered. I couldn't answer. Because my screen, the blank one that should have had no location data, suddenly blinked. A single line of text appeared. Call origin. Terminated residence. I felt sick. That's not a real address. That's not even possible. I tried calling the number back. It wouldn't connect, like it had never existed. I spent the rest of my shift shaking. When I got home, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard her voice. I don't know where I am. The final call. A week later, I got another call, 2:17 a.m. No ID, no location, the same woman, the exact same words, every single one, word for word, like a recording. I transferred the call immediately. I couldn't listen to it again. I filed a report. My supervisor told me to drop it. This happens sometimes, he said. It's just a glitch in the system. A glitch, that's what they called it. I quit a month later. 1 year later. I don't know if it was a prank, a hoax, or something else entirely. But sometimes, late at night when my phone buzzes, I swear I hear static. I always check the time, every year. Same date, same time, 2:17 a.m. I never answer, because one day I know, if I do, she won't be alone.